Joyous Rising family, this is Dr. Kia Pruitt. It is Tuesday, October 25th, 2022, and the time is 11:08 a.m. As promised, family, we have with us Mr. Andy Schectman, the CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals Company. Now, Mr. Schectman has been in business for over 30 years. He and his company has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, and in 30 plus years has not had one single complaint. The company has done over $8 billion in gross sales, and Miles Franklin Company is one of 24 companies worldwide to ever be approved by the U.S. Mint as an authorized reseller of their product. Having said that, family, I am going to yield the floor to Mr. Schectman to tell us more about himself, his company, and why we should be interested in precious metals today.
Well, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for such a lovely welcome and introduction. I greatly appreciate it. Yeah, and I've been looking forward for a while to catching up with you. I think one of the things that has surprised me the most about the last few years is how time just seems to all meld together, and it's difficult to keep track and to keep pace with what's happening. So many things keep changing so rapidly that it just seems that we don't have much time these days to find any spare time to jump onto other podcasts and whatnot. But I am certainly glad to be here, and it is long overdue. Who are we? My father and I started this company together, as you mentioned, 33 years ago. We have recently eclipsed, we're almost $8 billion in transactions. We are U.S. Mint representatives. We're licensed and bonded in what is a federally non-regulated industry. And you're right, we've never had a customer complaint. It is something that I am exceedingly proud of. We are one of only 24 U.S. Mint authorized resellers, kind of the cherry on top of my career sundae. And we've at our roots have been educators. We believe in precious metals, but it's important, I think, before we start this conversation, to lay out a fundamental understanding of precious metals. When I started this company with my father in 1989 as a 19-year-old young man, there was one rule and only one rule that I had to follow. He said, listen, let's start this company together. And, you know, you and I will do this from scratch. My father's middle name is Miles, and his best friend who loaned us $60,000 in 1989, his middle name was Franklin. We are the embodiment of the American dream. We come from nothing. And in 33 years have done nearly 8 billion in transactions without a customer complaint. But that one rule, that only rule that he imposed upon me as a young man starting a business, was that I would buy something every 2 weeks. I said, well, Dad, if that's the only rule, that's no problem as far as I'm concerned. That's easy. And he says, you will buy something every 2 weeks with every paycheck. And if you do that, we're good to go. Well, I've owned the company now for over 2 decades, and he's been retired, but I've honored my promise to him. Even though he's still kind of my partner, he's not going to fire me any longer. And I've honored my promise to him for 33 years. Every 2 weeks, I've purchased something. I have never missed a 2-week period ever in 33 years. And to me, precious metals are wealth more than anything. It's not an investment. It's been wealth that has outlived 2 world wars and German hyperinflation and the Great Depression, and still is immutable wealth. And I think from that standpoint, it's easier to have a discussion that, look, this is not about buying metal to become wealthy. Yeah, if you own enough of it, you are wealthy. But to me, it is wealth. It is wealth that has outlived the test of time. And in the year 3000, Kia, when the dollar bills in our wallet that we call money are hanging from a frame in the Smithsonian, I believe gold and silver will still be forms of immutable wealth. So that's where I start from. That's the platform from which we would have this discussion. And from that standpoint, I'll yield the floor to you and answer any questions that you have.
Okay, so you said that precious metals equate to wealth. So if someone has money and they're desiring to preserve that money, would you say that one of the best ways is to then use the fiat dollars to buy money to preserve what they already have versus just trying to become rich? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. It's not about return on your money. It's about
Mhm.
return of your money. I think that precious metals, to me, is money, is wealth. And so when I accumulate precious metals, it's in the respect that I hope I never need to use it. If I do, I'm darn glad I have it. And it's not just in the capacity of an emergency, Kia. It's also in the capacity of an opportunity.
Okay.
We've seen assets be blown sky high thanks to suppressed interest rates and more money created in the last 3 years than in the entire history of the country preceding. And so this distortion and misallocation of capital and resources has created difficulty in finding price discovery, where houses can double or triple in a year, where equity portfolios can double or triple in a year, where cryptocurrencies can go up tenfold in a year. And that has created an environment where I think we have distortions and misallocations, not only in resources, but in price discovery. And
Mhm.
so when you talk about precious metals, to me, it's wealth. And it's not about getting wealthy. I think it's about protecting ourselves from what is coming down the pike as a result of these distortions and as a result of rising interest rates that are inversely correlated to all the asset prices that make people feel wealthy. In other words, stocks, bonds, and real estate at all-time highs are all inversely correlated to a rise in interest rates. That's really what I'm getting at. And I think it's important to look at metals in that capacity. You're not buying them to get wealthy. They may perform very, very well, but what that really says is that the dollar that we call money will be losing value precipitously in relation to the barometer, which is gold and silver.
Yes, and you talked about the dollar losing value. And what I noticed is that country after country have been leaving the United States dollar. And I heard you say on one podcast before that the USD was the world reserve currency, and you explained to us what made the USD the world reserve currency. So I would like for you to please explain that to us on this channel. What made what made the USD the world reserve currency, and why it is important to know this information today as countries leave the USD and flee to other type of
Very
country basket.
important.
Mhm.
Yeah. So after World War II, the Allies all met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, and they anointed the dollar the world reserve currency. This would have been in 1944. And the promise of the US government to the world was to the leaders of the world that you can always exchange the dollars that you hold back to the US government at a fixed rate of $35 an ounce of gold. So countries, not people, not the citizens, because the people in this country from 1933 until 1974, it was illegal to own gold. But for the governments could exchange their dollars that they held as the world reserve currency for gold at a fixed rate of $35 an ounce. And this is what gave stability to the world reserve currency. It was pegged to gold at 35 bucks an ounce. And towards the end of the Vietnam War, President de Gaulle from France realized that the US was creating more dollars and issuing more treasuries than we had gold backing it at Fort Knox. So he sent warships over from Paris with filled with dollar bills to New York Harbor and said to the government, give us back our gold. We would like to exchange the dollars for gold. And we did. And they bled down a very large portion of the gold held at the Treasury. When in 1971, in August, President Nixon supposedly temporarily never opened back up, but he closed the gold window, meaning he went back on our promise to the world, saying you can no longer exchange your dollars for gold. At that point, the currency was fiat, backed by nothing, like all currencies are today. But it was a few years later that Henry Kissinger was dispatched to Saudi Arabia in an effort to strike a deal, which they did. And the deal was, we will protect you, Saudi Kingdom. We will provide you military assistance. We'll put missiles on your border. We'll protect you from any adversarial foe. But for that privilege, you and OPEC, by extension, will denominate oil globally in dollars. And they have. And since 1974, just about 100% of all oil purchases globally have been valued in USD. And so it's created a synthetic demand for the United States dollar. It's created what's called the petrodollar, and has given us the world reserve standard, where if you want to have energy, you need to have dollars. So every country in the world does. And what's happened is a progression of events away from this. And I think they were really expedited or accelerated by the weaponizing of the US dollar and kicking Russia out of SWIFT. Now I'm getting a little ahead of myself, so let's back up and we'll go back to September of 2021, when the day we left Afghanistan. And if you grew up in this country, you understand, if you're our age, Kia, you understand that it would have been unfathomable to leave our own servicemen and servicewomen behind enemy lines.
Yes.
That's something that, United States we always would hear, no man or woman left behind, ever, right? And that was a mantra that was ingrained to you growing up in this country. Well, leaving our own servicemen and women behind enemy lines in Afghanistan, leaving the people who trusted us, the Afghan freedom fighters who trusted us, not only did we leave them behind, we provided their biometrics to the Taliban. It was an embarrassment of riches. One of the most embarrassing things I've seen as a patriot, as an American, to see our people left in such a precarious, dangerous position, with people hanging from the wing of a transport plane as it left Afghanistan. There's no coincidence to the timing of the announcement. The day after that, Saudi Arabia and Russia announced a joint military cooperation agreement. And the day after that, Russia announced the same thing with Nigeria. Now, Saudi Arabia being the largest OPEC producing country and the linchpin of it, and Nigeria the fourth or fifth largest OPEC producing country. But here you have the center of the dollar hegemony, the Saudi kingdom, now being protected by another military superpower. Say what you want about their conventional war in the Ukraine. This is a country that has hypersonic ICBMs. And this is the technology that the United States does not possess. These are the missiles that go Mach 10 up in the atmosphere and hit the ground at the speed of an asteroid. And the day after they announced this joint military cooperation agreement with both countries, they announced publicly that they have this technology in all of their nuclear powered submarines. It was their way of saying, don't mess with us.
Yeah.
And the State Department quickly came out and said, this is a concern. We don't have this technology. So if you realize that for nearly 50 years, we have been protecting the Saudi kingdom, to see another country doing it is something that is very concerning. I've talked at length about the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, China, India, South Africa, and how they are all joining together with other countries joining the BRICS in an effort, I believe, to fight back and push back against Western hegemony. We have seen recently the BRICS nations come out and say they are going to issue a new world reserve currency. They are going to peg it to commodities. We've seen gold be reclassified, the world's only other tier 1 reserve asset, by the Bank of International Settlements. These pieces are starting to go together. I've talked a lot about the Chinese Belt Road and Rail Initiative. It's the largest infrastructure project in human history. It's connecting Asia and Africa, parts of Europe and South America. It's the most ambitious infrastructure project ever attempted in the United States. Is not part of it, but who is? All 13 OPEC producing countries. The realization that a good portion of the world, the Belt Road Initiative, all of its participants and the BRICS nations comprise about 85% of human population, and the US is not part of it. Now, where it gets frightening is in the statement that Saudi Arabia just made last week. They just came out at a conference in South Africa, and this is confirmed by the Crown Royal Prince and of Saudi Arabia and by the President of South Africa, that Saudi Arabia is now joining the BRICS nations. And all it would take for things to get really, really interesting in this country, when you realize that asset prices have been blown sky high, is for Saudi Arabia and the rest of OPEC, who have publicly snubbed President Biden. And why would they want anything to do with us? Let's think about this for a moment. We're going green and digital. We are going away from the combustion engine. We've told the world that we don't want any combustion vehicles on the road after 2030. We're going green. We are destroying their way of life. And yet they can join the BRICS nations, which is 85% of humanity, all of which still use the combustion engine. Why would they want to do us any favors? And so when they came out and said the other day that no, in fact, we won't increase production into the midterm election, we're actually going to decrease it by 2 million barrels. Two senators, Democratic senators, came out and said, we need to remove the Patriot missile battery defense system from the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. This is an open act of aggression. Really? We closed down our Keystone pipeline. We de-incentivize our own energy infrastructure plans here, and we go to Venezuela and Saudi Arabia begging for oil. And when they say no, it's an act of aggression. So we want to pull our military presence from there. And it is that military presence that has given us the world reserve status for the last 50 years. The idiocy of that policy is ridiculous. But you have to ask yourself, was all of this intended? Was it intended to incite a controlled demolition? Because when we weaponize the dollar against Russia, telling Russia, you can't use it, but the rest of the world can, imposing these sanctions, freezing their assets, I think this opened Pandora's box. You see a country like China, who's for 7 months in a row have dumped US treasuries, almost 150 billion. Why? Because they're looking at Taiwan. You look at a country like Saudi Arabia, who now we're acting aggressively against, and we're going to pull all military assistance away from and open up something called NOPEC, which is a bill that would strip the antitrust immunity from OPEC and allow us to sue them in court. I mean, do you see how this is becoming a situation that really isn't friendly any longer? And when this happens, and the coalition of all of these countries that comprise 85% of humanity moving away from the US dollar, already saying we're going to issue a new world reserve currency pegged to commodities. We already mentioned that gold is now the world's only other tier 1 reserve asset, along with the US dollars. And you can see by pushing Russia out of SWIFT, the rest of these countries, the rest of these nations are saying, are we next? Could this happen to us? Don't you think we ought to have a plan B, a back door? And so what you are seeing, I believe, is a rallying cry against the Western hegemony and hypocrisy. And that's bringing everyone to the table, all of these nations. We've seen countries that have already said they want to join BRICS too: Mexico, Egypt, Turkey, Iran, Venezuela, Argentina. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, and they are all breaking from the Western system and coalescing with a group that has a common goal to destabilize and fight back, push back against century-old Western hegemony. And that rallying cry gets everyone to the table. What gives everyone equal footing and is the glue that makes it work is the pegging of commodities. As they've already said, the Russian finance minister said this will be pegged to commodities. That's the glue. And I think that it's happening, and it's happening in real time. And so what we are witnessing for the very first time is the possibility of losing the dollar as the world reserve standard. So what does that mean? Well, if all of a sudden OPEC made that announcement and the dollar was no longer the only currency used to buy oil, Saudi Arabia is already selling their oil to China for the petro-yuan bond. Nigeria, same thing. You're seeing deals being struck right now between Saudi Arabia and India for payment in rupee. These all used to settle in dollars. Once this happens and the announcement is made, you will see the dollar lose utility and function. And the world who's had to own dollars for 50 years will say, I don't want them anymore. And they'll start to dump them. And it will happen, I think, with velocity, because as one dumps, the other will dump, and the dollar starts to fall, everyone will dump. And those dollars come home, because now you don't need them to buy oil anymore. And when those dollars come home, it creates a very inflationary environment, maybe hyperinflationary. And the biggest issue with all of this is in that environment, when you see massive inflation, you see interest rates spike, you have to have higher interest rates to compensate for inflation. But the problem with all of that is that stocks, bonds, and real estate are inversely correlated to that event. So when you talk about the Klaus Schwab Great Reset, if all of a sudden OPEC were to dump dollars globally and the rest of the world followed suit, then I think what you would see would be the very strong possibility of a reset type of moment where the dollars collapse, creating hyperinflation here domestically, interest rates spike, and they blow up everything that makes people feel wealthy. Stocks, bonds, real estate, and the dollar simultaneously all collapse. There's your great reset. And it's as fragile as maintaining a relationship with the Saudi kingdom that a few senators now are saying, let's just pull all military assistance. This is an open act of aggression. The beginning of the end is this close away. And I don't think people realize how important it is right now to mitigate exposure to the US dollar, because something wicked this way comes, Kia, and I'm growing more and more certain of that with every passing day.
With the dollar increasingly losing its value all across the world, and I heard you say that while they're dumping dollars, then the dollars will come back home domestically, and then that will cause inflation to go up even higher. How can we, everyday people who have nothing to do with what these world leaders are doing, you know, and all these agreements and disagreements, how can we, the little people, prepare ourselves for what is to come? And when I mean little people, I mean everyday people.
I think you remove any variable rate debt because interest rates will rise.
Okay.
I think you prepare, you have food, you have water, you have something to protect your family. You mitigate your exposure to the dollar. You have something outside the dollar. That would be gold and silver.
Okay.
I think it's, and that's why I say it's wealth. It's not an investment. It is to protect you against what is coming. And I think there's only so much we can do, but in an environment where the dollar is dumped like that and markets collapse and companies go bankrupt, I think you definitely need to prepare as if a hurricane is coming outside your back door. And that means food, that means water, that means small bills and cash, that means precious metals, that means something to protect your family. I think it's real. I think it's never been so real. And you can see this by the actions of the biggest money in the world and what they're doing, the positions that they're taking on COMEX, which is the commodity exchange where all commodities are valued globally. It's being bled dry of its gold and silver to levels that no one's ever seen before. The same thing with the London Metals Exchange. It's as if the biggest money in the world sees something coming and their actions are betraying the price and the rhetoric. What can you do? You mitigate your exposure to the dollar best you can. You get out of variable rate debt and you prepare. And you know what? With gold, you hope you never need to use it. You're damn glad if you have it. And if not, and that's not just for for an emergency, it could be an opportunity, because these asset prices are so high, stratospherically high, that when they find equilibrium with the rising interest rate environment, there'll be great values. And that's when you have dry powder in the form of gold and silver. You sell and you purchase that home you've always wanted, or that cabin you've always wanted up on the lake that is selling for a third of what it is right now, or blue chip stocks that are selling right now at 25 times earnings, paying nothing in the form of dividends, that would be selling at 6 or 7 times earnings, paying a 6 or 7% dividend. There are opportunities that will make themselves available for those who are not wiped out by having everything in dollars and in dollar-based assets. So you prepare, and you do so by what the biggest money in the world is doing, and you de-dollarize, and you try and find the way to have assets outside the system. In other words, easier said, if you are not a contrarian right now, it is my belief that ultimately you will become a victim. And a victim when this global shift from west to east happens. And I think it's this close to happening.
Yeah, you mentioned the word prepare, and I always tell my audience to think proactively. And having said that, and you talked about how we can prepare by having food, water, and precious metals. People have asked me how much, and I know that's a tricky question because I don't know how much people can afford. How much should they invest, or how much silver and gold should they have in their possession in order
I
to?
think the better way of answering that question is to turn it around.
Okay.
A trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. We have a $31 trillion debt on top of 150 trillion in unfunded liabilities in Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, government, military pensions. Social Security alone is 55 trillion underfunded, filled with IOUs. Trillion seconds ago is 31,688 years ago. The numbers are too big. The country is insolvent and broke. So the answer should be not how much gold and silver do you want, but what exposure do you want to this system? All of it accumulated at amongst the lowest interest rates in human history, which has created an illusion of prosperity. And when interest rates rise, as interest rates rise, the things that make people feel wealthy are inversely correlated to it. They'll collapse. And we've never dealt with the possibility of being challenged or losing our world reserve status. That's what's different this time. And I think in an environment like that, all bets are off. So how much gold and silver? I think what is traditionally accepted as a wise hedge is woefully underallocated. I think it's more along the lines of what exposure do you want to this system that seems to be on the precipice of a major global shift, a change, a revaluation, and work backwards from there. So more than most financial advisors would tell you is prudent, I guess, is the easiest way I can answer that.
Okay. Now I do have some people in my audience, including my mom, who has IRAs and retirement funds. And she told me, and some other people have asked me to ask you if there's a such thing as a gold IRA and what that means, and if they could get one or get some for, I don't know what that is. So could you explain that? And could they get one through you or your company?
Yeah, so you are allowed to take an IRA that you currently have and roll it over into what is, a self-directed IRA. A rollover is a tax-free transfer from one company to another. There's a dozen or so custodians that allow for precious metals to be in the IRA.
Yes.
And the one that I work with the most, that I've had the best luck with, is New Direction Trust Company out of Louisville, Colorado. Their website is N as in new, D as in direction, T as in trust, CO as in company.com, NDTCO. You would roll over your IRA to New Direction. And inside that, they call it a precious metals IRA, but really you can buy anything you want. You can buy stocks and bonds and whatnot, but you can also buy precious metals. So the answer is yes. And the neatest part about it, Kia, is the ability to take possession of the metal through distribution. Now that's a taxable event. In your mom's case, she's probably near the age of distribution. At 72, you have to start taking distribution. It's called a required minimum distribution. So normally people would sell the asset within their IRA. Let's say they own ExxonMobil stock. They'll sell it, go to cash, and take a distribution in cash. Now you can do that with the metals. You can sell it, go to cash, take a possession of cash, or you can say, send me the metal instead that you're holding for me in a segregated depository. And the metal gets sent to you as a distribution. You could cash the whole IRA out and say, send me all my gold and silver. It's a taxable event. But if you believe enough in gold and silver as wealth to have it as part of your IRA, the ability to take possession, I think, is really kind of cool.
So if a person, I know they do, if they're interested in doing business with you, with Miles Franklin, how can they contact you? Should they go to your website? Should they email you? Should they call you? What is the process for them to order products from your company?
So our new website is almost done. We've been working on it for almost a year now. It's been a series of aggravations and setbacks, but we're almost ready to offer a new website that will allow people to purchase online. In the meantime, send us an email at info@milesfranklin.com and say Kia Pruitt sent me, and we will make sure your listeners get it up to the date inventory. We'll answer all their questions. We'll make sure they're getting as good of a price as they'll find anywhere in the country. And from brokers that I have personally trained or have known my whole life. My entire staff are people I have known my entire life. Go way back to some of them back to elementary school with. They're family to me. So we will treat you very well. We will answer your questions. We'll make sure you get the best price and send you an inventory list. And it's that simple. Info@milesfranklin.com. The new website's almost done. The website we have right now is informationally based. You are not allowed to purchase on the online store, which is more or less closed. But the new one, which will be in a couple of weeks, will have all of those bells and whistles. But in the meantime, info@milesfranklin.com, and in the subject line, Kia Pruitt sent me, and we will make it a very, very good experience for all your listeners.
And right now your website is milesfranklin.com.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, family. I see that I'm running out of time. I just want to say thank you so much, Mr. Schectman or Andy, for coming on today and explaining what's going on in the world as it relates to the United States dollar, countries moving away from the dollar, and how we should prepare. So family, remember, we're all about being proactive, to beginning with the end in mind and taking care of ourselves, our communities, and our posterity. So having said that, it's been a great pleasure to have Mr. Schectman on with us. I know you all will leave many comments in the comment section. I hope we've said something to raise your vibrations and bring you joy and hope as you prepare for your future that you desire for your family. Create a magnificent reality, family, and go out today and have a great day. In fact, make it a great day. Mr. Schectman, do you have any final words you'd like to say?
No, I think you said it well. I guess I would just simply say, trust your gut. We live in a very strange time of uncharted waters where it's difficult to get advice from anyone because it's all a big guess based upon where we're going. Can't really compare where we are with anything in history. So trust your gut, prepare, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here, Kia, and I look forward to hopefully coming back again real soon.
It's my great pleasure. Now, do you have an email, not email, but newsletter or anything, or
So if you sign up at info@milesfranklin or send us an email, we will add you to our list.
okay.
Where I do a half a dozen or a dozen of these interviews every single week, talk strategy and about direction of the markets and whatnot, and you'll be added to those. And when the new website is up, there'll be more information. So yes, we do have something that we send out once per week that lists all our specials that we publish every week in product and pricing and interviews that I've been on over the previous week.
Okay, and when the new website comes on, family, or comes online, you'll be able to order directly from the interactive website. Okay, that's it for us, Mr. Schectman. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you very soon, and I will give you a call after this is over.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye, family. Peace.
Bye-bye.
Make it a great day.